I saw their PR. Not many journalists were visiting this little, company in the back halls of CES.
And nobody knows about them now because Apple acquired them.
Well, everybody knows about them because the technology that they were talking about and showing off is now in the iPhone that
Sure.
I'm holding, right? And it took eight years from the time I saw it in the backlight. And the guy who was explaining it to me had worked on it for 5 years already. So the founder of PrimeSense, he's worked on it for 13 years. So think about that as your career. You're working on something for 13 years before it ships. and everything he talked to me about is still ahead of us. He showed me how a 3D sensor can see how hard I'm touching things from 3 feet away, because it can see your finger squeezing together
Sure.
at such detail that it can see that you're pressing down on a surface, right? And they showed me all sorts of new user interfaces and new ways of thinking, new ways of doing shopping, right? They showed me a shelf with a bunch of cereal on it, and it could see that I touched the cereal. It could see that I held the cereal, right? And so all the stuff I'm telling you about, I saw 8 years ago in some damn suite. And so that's why I'm not that smart. I'm not that innovator who spent 5 years in an R&D lab trying to make a 3D sensor work. That ain't me. If you think it is, I'm sorry. Got to correct that notion. But I talk to these people at scale, and that's what I do. That's why I see books and why I see trends way before they happen, and why. I mean, I live in a weird world. There's an Apple spatial computing prototype literally 10 feet from me. You want to go see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see if it's there. It usually is. You'll crack. This will be a crack up for you, right? So, all right. So I get out of my garage, and I go next door, and there's a Ford Explorer sitting there, and that's an Apple prototype.
That's an Apple
Of a
prototype.
spatial.
There's a bunch of
That's a
sensors in that
spatial
thing.
computer. There's a 3D sensor in that thing, and they're putting sound on buttons in that thing, right? Volvo explained how spatial audio works in cars. So my neighbor works for the CarPlay team at Apple, and my back fence neighbor works for Google doing advertising optimization. And I'll get back in the Tesla because it's quieter. That's Silicon Valley, right? I live a block from Netflix. So yeah, so get this. This thing's been sitting there for 2 years. By the way, I figured it out because he has a different car like literally every day, right? My neighbor does. And I'm like, dude, how do you get a different car every day? What are you doing at Apple? He's like, well, I'm not supposed to tell anybody. I'm like, come on. And I figured it out before he told me. I figured out what was going on because I talked to Volvo and I realized, oh shit, he has a different car every day. Anyways, he builds chips for Apple. He got moved here by Apple from Paris. So that's the way the Valley is. You just meet people who are doing weird shit, and they generally like to talk about it, right? That's why your show is so interesting.
Absolutely. So as you noted, you have an opportunity to very broadly interact with lots of innovators in this space. And this latest book, The Infinite Retina.
And innovators elsewhere.
And
right?
Yes, we don't want to be geographically biased in this case. Innovators everywhere.
No, but in music, I pitched Taylor Swift's music label, and food, and other things, movies, TV, right?
Very broad.
Remember, Netflix is here. So I have to, if I want to understand Netflix, I have to have a broader set of interests than just understanding the technology that gets packets from their servers to your TV.
Sure.
Right?
You've now kind of worked on several books, but the last three have kind of had some similar threads across them. This notion that we have computers with us all the time. They have lots of sensors in them. They're paying attention to what's happening in the world. AI is an increasingly important element.
The first book was on social networking and social software. So I think it fits perfectly.
It does fit,
into this too,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's not going away, right? You're
Very
still
true.
going to comment on things.
Very true.
Maybe you give a 3D comment on a thing, but it'll still be a comment underneath a post, right? Or underneath an experience.
So over the arc of these several books and the deep thinking that went into each of them, how has your perspective changed on personal computing, on AI, on all these sorts of things?
Certainly, I am horrible at timing. I have Elon Musk's disease, or he has mine. And both of us can't figure out when this shit's really going to happen. Even now that I have a pretty good idea of dates, Tim Cook could wake up next March and say, I'm killing the whole project and switching gears. It's not passing the tests. It's the customers that we show it to don't like it, think it's too freaky. He could kill the whole thing, right?
Timing is hard.
Timing is really hard. It's already slipped. Even it was supposed to be released a month ago, right? And they took all the headphones off the store shelves, and then they delayed the introduction because they realized that it wasn't done. This stuff happens all the time. So I've been studying Apple since I was 13 years old, right? I grew up in Cupertino. My dad was an engineer. He moved us to Cupertino in 1971. And Apple started in 1976. So I got a tour of Apple when I was 13, when it was like a couple buildings, if not one building. And I was in the first computer club at High Junior High. And so I've been watching Apple for a long time. What has changed in the last 10 years? I'm seeing a real shift in culture of companies. And part of that is we can talk about my past a little bit. I'm seeing that diversity is a lot more needed now because we're about to put a 3D map of the world that everybody's going to interact with, right? So the skill set a developer team needs today to play in that world is very different than the skill set that was needed to build something for Unix or Apple II or even the Macintosh, right? And so I've evolved my thinking a lot on that. Most of when I'm talking with people who work at Volvo or Unity or somebody who's on your show, that kind of thing, we talk about what this new world is going to be like and what is potentially going to be expressed in this world and what's not, and what are going to be the rules, and what, if Apple's going to dominate this for a couple of years like they dominated with the iPhone, what does that mean? What does it mean for Facebook? What does it mean for Google? What does it mean for Amazon, Tesla, Snap, right? And then all the other players, Magic Leap and Microsoft, right?
Yeah. So there's definitely kind of this deeper appreciation.
Yeah, the biggest one for me, I did not see the audio importance. I didn't get just how important that's going to be. And now that I'm talking to a lot of people about this, I see that audio is much more important than I really thought of it through. And that it's brilliant for Apple to start with headphones. In fact, they've already started. These AirPod Pros have spatial audio in them, which means you have a billion surround sound system in your $250 headphones, right? You can put music or sound all the way around you. You can move it around. There's an app called Spatial Bliss that I recommend everybody get with these AirPod Pros, because it really is key to understanding how Apple's ecosystem is going to evolve. You really have to understand what spatial audio is. And most people in this industry understand it because I was talking to somebody at Unity today, and he goes, that's how Unity works. That's how video games work. The Unity engine handles the spatial audio pretty much for you, right? So you don't have to think too much about it. But spending some time thinking about audio and increasing your skills right now and making badass audio experiences, like a marching band, for instance, is going to build a brand in audio that's going to translate in 2022 when the visor comes, right? And so now all of a sudden you put on this visor and it sounds badass like a marching band, and it looks badass. I can see a badass marching band in front of me, right? So it's going to be a lot of fun for a lot of people. There's going to be a lot of new companies built in the next 18 months.
Yeah. Super, super exciting and fun time to be in this area.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, let's go back. I'd love to, you were one of the very early users, proponents, somebody who really appreciated early on the potential impact of social media. At the time, I remember I was in a startup and I was talking to somebody about blogs, and the person says, "What on earth are you talking? What the heck is a blog? Well, it's a weblog. Yeah. Well, what the heck is a weblog? Like, the concept is just so weird at the time."
Yeah.
But you're very early into really appreciating
2000.
2000.
Started blogging in 2000, and Dave Weiner was one of my speakers along with Dory. They said, "Oh, you should do a session on blogging in 1999." I'm like, I pulled out Google, which was brand new. I said, "There's only 200 blogs. What are you talking about?" I just give them the same answer your friend gets. What are you talking about? What? There's nothing here. What are you talking about? But they talked me into starting one, and Dave Weiner took me to Woz's Super Bowl party like in 2001, and he linked over to me and sent me 3,000 people, and I'm like, whoa, well, there's a lot of people reading these things that I didn't think about, right? So I was lucky in a lot of ways to be in the right place. Dory Smith and Dave Weiner got me into blogging. Yeah.
And then you kind of took that with you to Microsoft, right? And at Microsoft, you created a new connection between this concept of social media and blogging and corporate personality, corporate kind of representation.
Yeah. I broke a lot of rules, didn't I? The 5 people I eventually joined up with Jeff Sandquist and then Pryor and 3 other guys who built the back end, Charles and a few others. And I was the video guy. I was like, oh, let's try to use this new internet video. YouTube was just starting. This was like 15 years ago, right? And I've been playing with See You, See Me and NetMeeting and video in the early days of Skype and stuff like that. And I interviewed 600 people at Microsoft, from Bill Gates to the janitor with a $250 video camera, and put the videos up online. What it did, when I say we broke a lot of rules, we did. Channel 9 broke all sorts of corporate rules.
Channel 9 was the Microsoft TV, the video station.
Yeah, it still exists. It's still a brand that, we started and still does similar kinds of things. It's very different now. It's much more like the things we tried to kill, actually. So we were doing blurry videos on this stupid Sony camcorder, not in a studio, right? And I would just go into somebody's office and go, "Who are you? What are you doing?" "Well, I'm building the future of Visual Studio." "Oh, really? Tell me about that." The thing that gave me an insight on is how a big company works and how it hires, how it fires, how it works, right? I pissed off a lawyer one time because I talked about something that didn't have the patent completely written yet. And so the lawyers said, "You're in trouble." I've been often in trouble in my life. And so, "You're in trouble. You got to sleep with a lawyer." And I'm like, "What?" "Yeah, we're going to put a lawyer in your hotel room for the next weekend, and he's going to tell you the facts of life." And I'm like, all right, that's an interesting punishment. I'll learn something at least, And they did. I spent a weekend with a lawyer at a conference and shared a room with him. And he told me everything about law that I could ever think of asking about. Like, how does trademark work? How does patent work? They had 803 lawyers, by the way, back then.
803 lawyers at Microsoft.
This was 15 years ago, right? And Facebook at that time only had a few hundred employees. So we had more lawyers than Facebook had completely, right? Everybody, right? Which shows the market strength of these big companies. They can get away with shit that very few things can get away with because they have so much ability to pay lawyers. Yeah. And if you ever beat them, and I've met a few people who won like $1 billion, $500 million lawsuits against them, that's pretty hard to do, right? Because you're up against 800 lawyers, you're up against an army of lawyers.
Yeah.
So it's a lesson for people, because we're going through that in our community, right? People are getting ripped off by Facebook and Apple all day long.
Yeah.
And you got to understand that's what these companies do. They're set up to do it and do it efficiently. At Microsoft, I was told not to look at patents, like patent the Apple, something like that. Because if they could prove a Microsoft employee looked at a patent, the damages went up 3 times.
This notion that we have to be careful, right? Because these large companies are so well armed with the lawyers. So you kind of took this notion of changing the relationship, the dialogue between these kind of corporate entities and with the broader population with you to Rackspace. And there, it was a younger company at the time, more in the weeds in many ways. People don't really appreciate what a Rackspace is. They understand what a Microsoft is because they use the product, they directly interact with the products that Microsoft creates. But Rackspace is a layer behind. Why Rackspace?
Yeah.
What was the goal of going there?
That's a funny story, actually. I had a producer, his name was Rocky. He actually died a couple of years ago. But back then, we worked at Fast Company magazine, and in 2008, the economy blew up, right? 2009. And my sponsors went away, and I had to lay off Rocky. And he calls me later that day and goes, I just got a new job, or like in a day. He says, I just got a new job at Rackspace. They want me to hire you. And I'm like, what? And it turns out Rackspace was started by a real estate developer named Graham Weston. He still owns the biggest buildings in San Antonio, Texas. And one of his floors was, he rented out to startups. And one of the startups was 2 guys who started Rackspace. And Rackspace back then was, they would put servers into your data center or into Rackspace's data center and rent them to you, right? So we would rent rack space. We would rent a piece of a data center to you. And it was started down in Texas, down in San Antonio. And the guy was, and Graham told me later, nobody would pay attention to him because he was a boring infrastructure company in the middle of Texas and nobody cared. And so he said, well, I'll just buy one of those Silicon Valley blogger types. If they're not going to pay attention to me, maybe they'll pay attention to me after I hire them. And so that's what went down. He bought himself a Silicon Valley journalist, right? And got people to pay attention to his company, made a lot of money after his IPO.
It worked. Yeah. It worked for him.
It worked. It got him into things that he wouldn't have gotten into otherwise, right? Like R&D labs and relationships with all sorts of people, including Tony Hsieh, who just died this last weekend.
That's right. You had a chance to interview him as part of that.
Interview him and hang out with him several times. And he took me to barbecue in Lockhart, Texas on his RV. So yeah. And he still was, just a couple of weeks ago, he was talking to my former boss. We all built relationships with people over the years, like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. It was also during kind of that period where, being a very public person, these past struggles, missteps also become very public.
Yep.
What have you done to improve yourself, to heal yourself, to kind of, work through improving those relationships?
You don't have to beat around the bush. There was an elephant in the room. I got blamed by several women for sexually harassing them or worse. And that was 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago, that I got Me Too'd, right? So I was in the New York Times in a list of people who got Me Too'd in the early days with Harvey Weinstein and all that. God. And I was thinking about this show because I don't want to talk about this very often. So I think this is an exclusive for you. And it's a respect I have for you because you're my favorite podcaster in this space. I think you're way better than anybody else.
Thank you.
In terms of voice and in terms of understanding the industry. And I think it's worth to have this kind of conversation with you. And cover it, and then we don't have to cover it too much anymore. But yeah, 11 years ago, I went to a party and got drunk and ended up grabbing somebody, Quinn, and shit went down, and I got blamed for it a few years later, right? And I'm sorry about that. I made a lot of mistakes and hurt a lot of people, and blew up my career, and caused my family a lot of pain, caused myself a lot of pain. Right? So you start out with going to rehab, you know? And hearing other people who also caused a lot of people other pain. You know, and some of the people in rehab killed people in drunk driving accident or something like that, right? And lots of people have a lot of losses, jobs lost, families lost, people pissed off at them, stuff like that. And yeah, that gets you awake real fast, having the internet angry at you, you know, and continue to be angry. And doors get closed in your face and stuff like that. So there's been a lot of losses. But it's not about my losses. It's about what people like me caused and still are causing. I still see people doing it. And it's like, guys, we gotta be better, because you're gonna need a diverse team to work on this stuff, right? And you're gonna need people who you don't agree with, maybe, you know, on your team. And there's lots of companies that are dealing with that right now, right? Coinbase is like, oh, you can't write about politics at work. Well, that's crazy. Why do you hire people who are smart, you know, if you're not going to let them have opinions? You know, it doesn't make sense to me. And because of my situation, I've heard so many stories of despicable behavior of men toward women and to each other, right? I've had guys grab my cock at South by Southwest parties too. It's just guys don't talk about that. It's just like not appropriate. But it happens to women a lot more than it happens to men. And I'm sorry for the role I played in that. And looking back, you asked what have I done? I mean, it comes up every day. So I think about it every day. Every time I look at Twitter and see somebody else going through it, or see the damage that causes, right? And people write about the damage that sexual harassment causes. So, and I can detail that. I can tell you how it hurt Uber, how it hurt Upload, how it hurt me, how it hurt women, how it kept people out of this industry. And we need a much more inclusive industry. So we need to fix this. And I can help.
How can you help?
Knock it off, man. You gotta change your attitude mentally. Otherwise, you're gonna keep doing it. Because I know changing myself is really a pain in the ass. It's not easy.
Not easy at all. Yeah.
No. Nobody goes to AA because it's a glorious day. I've never met an AA member who said, I joined AA because, man, I won the lottery. I got a raise at work. My wife was crazy about me. And no, that's not why you go to AA. But it's funny. Everybody who goes to AA is like, this is the best club I've ever been a part of, right? Because you can actually be honest with people and tell them what a loser you are. And tell them what's actually going on. And that's very rare. How many people on Twitter tell you the truth? Not very many.
Yeah, very few.
Yeah. When it happens, it's notable, right? When an entrepreneur actually tells you what's going on behind the scenes, it's notable. So I don't know. I'm still a work in progress. I'm still an asshole. I'm still a douchebag. I'm trying not to be.
Yeah. As you have an opportunity to engage with other startup CEOs, right, and you kind of share some of these lessons, what message do you share with these executive teams at these early stage companies?
That we don't focus on mental illness nearly enough in this industry, that we lose too many startups to suicide, to other kinds of problems, right? And all of these are mental loops that we picked up over the years, right? How did I become a misogynist asshole? Well, I've been taught by the best. Right? I mean, been taught by the best. This whole culture is that way in some ways, right? So it's a thing you have to fight against culturally. And the Me Too movement actually is doing a pretty good job there. I have nothing. Some other things, by the way, I do. I write a lot of gratitude lists. I keep track of whenever I start thinking about my losses, I start thinking about the gains. Right? My my family is in a way better place today. My friends are stronger. I'm now taking care of the kids, and washing dishes. I didn't do that before, right? Doing laundry. And being okay with, not running around the world speaking everywhere. That's shut down for me for two reasons, the COVID and Me Too for the most part. So I don't do that. And I don't miss that too much, because that is mentally a really tough career. People don't understand that. Justin Bieber just sang a song about being lonely, even though he's on top of the world, right?
Right.
You're in a hotel room without anybody around you to support you. And there we go. Shit goes down.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a reason why there's that stereotype of, the rock star lifestyle. It's that
We
loneliness.
lose rock stars. Actually, the music industry has a whole charity to help people deal with addiction and with mental illness because it happens in that industry a lot more than it does in ours. But we lose. Somebody told me a stat that entrepreneurs are 7 times more likely to commit suicide than an average person, and you see some of this happen. And you also don't see the downside of starting a company, which is like when things are going bad, you're not able to pay your salaries next month, right? That puts a lot of stress on somebody, and they can't really talk about it with too many people, right? So there's actually a good group of entrepreneurs that gets together and meets and talks about some of these issues and does it in a fairly open and non-public way.
Are there organizations, are there clubs that that entrepreneurs can join that kind of focus on this sort of honest reflection, expression of the challenges they're facing?
There is. When it's certainly something I would get a mentor on or talk to other people. Generally, it's sort of interesting that the first step in AA is you got to ask for help, right? Which is really hard. It's really hard to say I'm in trouble and I need some help to other people, right? That's why it's the first step. It's really hard to do for a lot of people, and a lot of people don't do it. And they die of alcoholism or opiate addiction or whatever is going on, right? And my brother-in-law is a gambler. And so you see people blow up their lives in a variety of ways.
That's hard. Asking for help is a massive request because you have to admit as part of asking for help that you actually need it. You have to admit that there might be something less than perfect about yourself, which is true for everybody, and to share that with somebody else.
Now imagine you're Elon Musk and you have to ask for help. That fucks with the whole narrative. That's really hard for some people to get to the point where, hey, I need some help here, right? And luckily I had people like that in my life that pulled me out of this hole. But it's a tough one. Anyway, so talking to entrepreneurs, find other people that you can really confide in, really let them know what's going on. I talked to an Israeli about it, a scientist who was studying addiction. He told me that the likelihood of success is telling other people.
Your likelihood of success goes way up the moment you tell somebody else.
Yeah. So, and this is sort of why you have to ask for help, right? Because now somebody else knows your problem and you're honest about it. So now you can work with that person and fix your problem, right? We call that in a sponsor, right? And there's places you can go. Not so much online, but you can sort of start watching. Like I have 2 lists of all the founders in the industry, right? Like 7,000 people. So you can watch that for a while, and if somebody's honest and vulnerable, maybe write them up and say, hey, I just saw you talking about this problem. Same thing. Can I spend an hour with you and talk to you about it, right? And if that doesn't work, get a therapist, right? You can pay somebody to listen to,
Yeah.
and they'll give you drugs or tell you how to fix it, right? Or help you mentally work through how to fix it. And there's a lot of VR, by the way, is really
Amazing that
used a
way.
lot in this,
Yeah.
right? I interviewed Skip Rizzo, who's doing all sorts of research with PTSD and dementia at USC. Yeah, VR is really good at fixing a lot of brain problems, right? Going to cause a few too, which is something we should talk about, right? But yeah.
What's next for you? How are you going to spend 2021?
I'm getting these Apple headphones, damn it. I'm not going to talk about anything until this is the mania side. My wife is like, you're totally into the mania right now. I'm like, I just figured out Apple. I'm happy. By the way, I don't know if you noticed this in your conversation. People are excited all of a sudden. There's like nobody has shipped yet, really, but there's so much work being done, and the excitement level's getting there. Right?
Yeah.
People are going, oh, we're excited about this industry all of a sudden, right? And it doesn't quite come through on Twitter sometimes, that excitement, because people can't talk about what they're coming out with next year.
Yeah.
But I think this industry is going to re-gel next year, which is going to be fun. But for me, I'm still trying to figure out what to do when I grow up. And there's a lot of doors that are closed to me. A lot of people, say, no, I don't want to deal with that hassle like Scopel. And so thanks for having me on your show. I'm playing with writing another book, but a fictional one, a science fiction kind of thing. And I'm also looking at what is my role in this industry if it's not a public role. How can I help people privately, with some of this stuff, or even just thinking through their strategy or whatever. I have a lot of skills there. So yeah. But the next 24 months are going to see so much incredible change that part of it's just going to be fun trying out new things again,
Yeah.
and having more of our friends join us in this revolution that's coming, this new paradigm.
Yeah.
Because very few of my friends have VR yet, and very few of my real life friends and real life family members have VR and understand it. And I try to put it on and on. But
there's a lot to be said about the potential influence of a fiction author. Right? For me, it was a Microsoft employee, Raz Nam, who wrote this trilogy that just blew me away. I loved his perspective on...
The Martian was written by an Apple employee, right? Yeah, you see the world. And
Ready Player One.
Yeah, Ready Player Two is disappointing a lot of people because it actually... This is the problem. If you don't see the future accurately, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it. And I wish some of the popular fiction shows more of the positive that's coming instead of just the negative. I can talk a lot about the negatives, right? I already did. This thing is going to know you at a level that is going to be very scary.
Yeah.
Right? It's scary for me because I know what's going on. Yeah, we're going to have lots of discussions over the next 24 months, I think, about just how much data do you want to give Facebook, because you're going to give it all. It's going to know everything about you in a few minutes. By the way, do you know how it's going to figure out everything about you in a few minutes?
How it's going to figure out everything about me in a few minutes?
Uh-huh. It'll get you to open up your closets. It'll get you to look at underneath your beds. It'll get you to open up drawers.
Well, if they partner with an insurance company, it's be inventory of my house.
No. When you put the headphones on the first times, this could happen. I'm not saying it will. Siri could announce herself to you and say, hey, welcome to the Apple Studio experience. And to start off, we've left a lot of fun things in your house. We want you to look underneath beds, open closet doors, pull out drawers, and go around the world, either outside or inside, doesn't matter.
A little scavenger hunt around the house.
A little scavenger hunt. And here's what's going to happen when you open up a closet door, for instance. The thing's going to see the closet, go, that's a closet. It's in the bedroom because we walked here. And it's going to image everything in there, including the walls of the closet. And it's going to put bats on the closet walls, hanging bats. You're going to stick your head in there and you're going to hear all these fluttering bats all around you because it has infinite surround sound speakers. Not 7, it's infinite. It can put a virtualized speaker on any surface in your closet with an audio recording of some bat fluttering around, making some noise. And you're going to stick your head in there and it's going to freak you out. And you're going to pull the head out and you're going to be like, that was freaky. And then you're going to put your head back in to enjoy the freakiness, right? And shit, man, there's a bunch of bats in my closet. This is so sick. And you go show everybody else in the house and go, hey, listen to this one. When you did that, you just scanned your closet.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Everything in it.
Step by step. It's going to know in a hurry.
Computer vision is going to segment every box that's in the closet, every toy, everything, every clothing, and it's going to start doing AI lookups on things. Now, it might not recognize everything right away, right? Might not recognize that you have Gucci shoes or whatever, or Nike shoes, but it will pretty fast. When you look at the M1 chip and you see a third of it is neural network, that shit is not being used. That's like a factory that's not used right now on the chip. That will be used in this world in 24 months. And it's going to know everything about you really pretty quickly.
Trust is going to be very important.
Very.
Let's wrap up with a few enlightening round questions.
Mm-hmm.
What commonly held belief about spatial computing do you disagree with?
So one thing I do is I study how people buy things. And this went way back to the 1980s when I understood why people decided on VHS instead of beta VCRs. And I'm getting a lot of resistance about this whole range of VR, AR, things on your face, things that are going to scan. When I try to tell this to people, normal people, and say your entire world is going to be scanned in the next 24 months and Apple is going to know everything, and they look at me like, what are you talking about? What? Part of that is because I have an autonomous car already. I know how good this shit is, and it's really good. The computer vision is getting badass. I talked with people like Sebastian Thrun, who started the Google Waymo self-driving team, and now is doing a bunch of new companies, right? And he said he made a mistake going with LiDAR, that cameras can do a lot. But LiDAR, he said the reason that he chose LiDAR on the Waymo car. So LiDAR in the self-driving car world is a sensor that has 64 or 80 lasers that are spinning, right? You see them on top of a Waymo car. There's something spinning on the car. That's a LiDAR. And it sees the world in 3D, right? So it's throwing out a laser light, measuring the time of flight, the time that the light takes to reflect off something and come back to the sensor. And then it knows where that thing is and also knows what that thing is. My Tesla, when it drives by a garbage can, says, oh, that's a garbage can. Or if I drive by a truck, that's a truck, right? Or bicyclist, oh, that's bicyclist, right? Yep. AI is really good at seeing patterns like that and understanding them. But when I talk to normal people, I get a lot of resistance on all these things. You saw it when I put Tesla video up of me not touching my hands on the wheel.
Yep.
You notice my kids didn't give a shit about it. They've driven tens of thousands of miles with the car driving. And it's pretty damn good. They know it's pretty damn good because they're still here. Right? And people are scared of this future. But by 2030, a lot of us are going to have experiences like this, driving in self-driving cars, right? And by 2030, we're going to wear things on our faces that are going to augment the world and listen to us and watch us and see the world and augment it, make it better. But people are like, I don't want to wear glasses. I hate glasses. Or that's just a segue. It's just your hype. Or it's just 3D TV all over again, right? Yep. You hear these common things, or I don't want to wear something. There's a lot of resistance. And there's a reason for this resistance. When we went from the Macintosh to holding a phone in our hand, that was a real change. This is going to be a bigger change than that. Because literally everything around us now is a computing surface and can be interacting with us. So a Coke can talk to us, right? And we can talk to the Coke can, right? It's really crazy. So I hear a lot of those kinds of resistances, and I take it with a grain of salt and smile, because every time I've gone through a paradigm shift, people have yelled at me and resisted. 1 million people protested Facebook's newsfeed, right? Made Mark Zuckerberg billions and billions of dollars, but 1 million people protested it when it came out and said, this is stupid. I don't like this idea. Yeah. I don't like this future, right?
The value is high enough, people will overcome that resistance.
the value is going to be huge. There's a reason that these companies are spending billions and billions and billions of dollars. I mean, Facebook alone is spending many billions, and probably it's going to spend more than 10. I think Apple's spending way more than that when you add up all the numbers of all the things that it bought, and also all the efforts that are going on. I mean, this, showing you the CarPlay guy, shows you the kind of investments. I mean, there's people all over the valley that are like him, that working on this stuff, right?
So despite the resistance, it's going to happen. The value is too high.
I'm quite convinced it will, but it'll be messy for a while. There'll be people, like I said, don't put on the headphones. That's your choice. Don't put them on. You put them on, it's the Apple's nose.
That's it. You're in.
You're in. And everybody's going to try them, I think. Everybody in the modern world, right? Because you're going to go over to somebody's house, they're going to have the Apple Studio headphones lying there, and you're going to put them on because you're curious and you didn't listen to me. And now you're addicted and you've given it all your data. And once you're in, you're happy, right? Because you're going to have experiences that you can't have. You can't have any other way, right?
Yeah. If you could sit down and have coffee with your 25-year-old self, what advice would you share with 25-year-old Robert?
Do more mushrooms. Which helps fix your brain, actually, it turns out. If I had anything to tell my young self, it would be decades of work can be wiped out in somebody's mind in a second. And so I should have thought about other people a lot more along the way. Can't do it over again. So all I can do is control right now. And that's what you learn in rehab. Yeah. Yeah, you can't take back what happened yesterday. As Tony Hsieh says, it doesn't matter what you did in your past. What matters is what you do in the future.
Wise words.
Yeah. I'll try to be better tomorrow.
Any closing thoughts you'd like to share?
Think about culture of your companies. Understand why Tony Hsieh wouldn't hire me, and understand how not to do it yourself, right? And understand how to build a new team. Where I'm going with this, I went to Stanford University and went to the AI lab there and met a woman, but she's a dancer, and she learned how to teach robots how to dance. And that sounds weird, but that's the new development team that you're going to need to teach computers how to see things as humans see things, right?
How our better angels as humans see things, not maybe how our biased selves see things. Bingo,
right? And her name is Katie Kwan, Stanford AI student. I have pictures in the book and everything. She builds AI systems for self-driving cars, for robots and augmented reality devices, because the car is having to communicate with you about what it's doing, right? And soon we might have an augmented windshield, and soon buttons are going to be able to talk to us, and we're going to be able to talk to buttons on the car. So, right? So think about, the button here on my steering wheel, which is a multi-switch button. You can push it left or right, or roll it up or down to scroll through things, or tap it, or double tap it, right? And soon it's going to have a little microphone on it, a virtualized microphone on it, and it's going to have a little virtualized display on it, right? It can put any display. So now I can talk to the button, and the button can do things both with audio and visual. Like if I touch it, it might scream, hey, right? Every time you touch it, it might go, hey, and you're like, what? That's weird. And it might tell you stuff about it, right? How to use it better, or what it does, or entertain you in some new way, right? That's the act of building a new kind of car, or a new kind of game, or a new kind of entertainment property, or a new kind of educational system, is going to require you to understand how humans can interact with machines. And there's a lot of cool people working on that. It's really interesting. People understand the brain at deep level. People who are doing things to affect the brain, to fix it, like Skip Rizzo, are real fun. We write about a whole bunch of them in our book. So, yeah.
Where can people go to learn about what you're working on right now?
I spend most of my time on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn and other places, but Twitter is where the community seems to have gelled for the most part, at least the people who are running companies and the press and the news, right? And so I have lots of lists of the industry on Twitter, and I watch everybody on Twitter, and I'm on Twitter a lot.
All right.
And I'm not doing other things like this.
Robert, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thanks.
Before you go, I want to tell you about the next episode. In it, I speak with Nathan Pettyjohn and Mike Losey, who are both at Lenovo. Nathan is the commercial AR/VR lead at Lenovo. He is also the founder and president of the VR/AR Association. Mike is the hardware product manager for commercial AR/VR at Lenovo. Previously, Mike spent 9 years at ODG, which for a long time was the premier creator of AR glasses. As the VP of Advanced Products there, he was behind the impressive R7, R8, and R9 glasses. In this conversation, Nathan, Mike, and I chat about Lenovo's role in delivering holistic end-to-end AR and VR solutions to companies. This includes software, services, and hardware. We talk about Lenovo's A6 headset and the lessons they've learned in the 2 years since its release. We also talk about an exciting new announcement. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss this or other great episodes. Until next time.